So, Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino is a nice, it's an easy read, and it's only 170 odd pages, and it's really impactful, and it's thematic landscape and all the mental kind of very, partly like magic realism, a little bit infused in that, but it's also a narrative device that's told through the semi biographical kind of lens of Marco Polo talking to the one and only Kublai Khan, who did actually meet one another in their lifetime. But obviously this is a heavily fictionalized account, and it came out in 1972 for what it's worth. So this is I don't know on the roster of when other Calvino books I did read. If on a winter's night, a traveler. Sorry, I don't know why I wanted to say a stranger. And the what was it? Difficult Loves. That was a collection of short stories. It was a little bit more of a kind of like less tongue in cheek, kind of less of a like kind of postmodern kind of healthiarity that I think he uses. Like kind of he seems like almost like a mix. This almost seems like a little bit more modernist in that sense. It reminded me a little bit of a something by Thomas Bernhard, like The Loser, where it's like talking about Glenn Gould, who's a real person, but it's through two fictional friends who have very different things. And I did do a review on that, I believe. And yeah, this is kind of a look into Marco Polo, obviously the 12th century. Was he 13th century? 1200s. I do know that, and I honestly, if aside from the game, obviously Marco Polo that everybody grew up, I did the cultural kind of knowing him from school and knowing that he kind of was the one responsible for bringing all the Western, all these kind of rather Eastern kind of like not necessarily the mysticism, but the kind of through the trade and that kind of the trading route that he took. That I do know that was his. He was the one that kind of brought that all the way. He was Italian too, so Italo Calvino was I actually recently learned that Calvino himself wasn't a true Italian. He was not that it really makes a difference, but that he was born in Argentina, I believe, but he emigrated over to Italy, I think, and I think his parents too like had a rough shot in the Second World War. It was the Nazis, I think, pulled a very cruel stunt in like making him believe that his parents were dead. So yeah, that obviously Calvino, like a lot of these modernist people, like whether it's Nabokov losing, going through leaving the Soviet Union and having to find his own way in America, and having to basically kind of give up on that kind of lifestyle he had. It was a little bit upper class that he was born into, but he lost everything. And yeah, he or whether it's Jerzy Kosinski going through like those horrific events that were partially autobiographical, and The Painted Bird, like those things. It's like the time frame of the author's lives can in no way escape them. Cynthia Ozak's The Shawl. She didn't personally go through that, herself, but it was even if it's not to say that just because you didn't go through these things you can't, that like doesn't mean you can't write about them, but it is definitely something I've noticed with like these kind of authors that they kind of coming back in a way of writing about it, maybe not directly but indirectly, kind of introjecting these things. But yeah, so Marco Polo is he's been to all these cities, and this book is divided into, it has an interesting kind of way it's organized up. So it's set up in 11 chapters, but there's 9 different parts of it. And the first part is structure, and so there's Cities in Desire is the first, and then Cities in Memory is the first, and then Cities in Desire, and then Cities and Signs, and then Trading Cities, Thin Cities, Cities in Eyes, Cities in Signs. Wait, confused. Yeah, well, it says it off. the screen here. Okay, so cities and names, cities in the dead, cities in the sky, and the continuous cities and hidden cities. So, yeah, and he's trying to basically describe all these things to Kublai Khan, and I'm not sure the extent in which Marco Polo actually knew Kublai Khan, and how I do know they knew one another, but I don't know how much of a correspondence they had. But I do know that Marco Polo talked, he couldn't describe, he said, I think there's a quote of him saying famously that he couldn't, he would need like more lifetimes, like he cannot possibly begin to describe the amount of things he saw, like in perfect detail, like that would, and that's because I think he said he'll go to the grave before he'll be able to actually describe all these adequately, or even partly adequately. So yeah, he was definitely wrestling with that. That's the very kind of human element of like that we can all abide in, and this is why it's kind of a postmodern thing, because it's very kind of poetic, but it's not told in a kind of 3-act structure. It's not like a hero's journey. There's no inciting argument, inciting anything. Really, the form of this is like, it's basically, I don't know why I accentuated that so much, but it's basically like Kublai Khan and Marco Polo going back and forth with these kind of long dialogical kind of monologues, really. Like kind of like Kublai Khan doesn't necessarily, so this is the first thing he's saying, is like Kublai Khan doesn't necessarily believe everything that Marco Polo says when he describes the cities visited by his expeditions, but the Emperor of the Tartar does continue listening in the young Venetian with the greater attention and curiosity, and has shown any other messenger or explorer of his. In the lives of emperors, there is a moment which follows pride in the boundless extension of the territories we have conquered. So, yeah, in the melancholy and relief, knowing we shall not give up any thought of knowing and understanding them. So, yeah, right off the bat, you get kind of an inkling of what's to come. And this kind of thing is like this kind of refrain is repeated again and again, where it's like not being able to describe something, not being able to fully express the true like glory or sublimity of something. And my kind of little bouts with traveling, short bursts as they were, as brief as they were, did kind of I kind of tease out a similar kind of feeling of like dang, I only just saw the beginning. I haven't even been to at this stage I haven't even been to like any other continent except for North America and Europe, and that's it. And I haven't been to I haven't been to East Asia or even Asia or any of the kind of any kind of Asiatic areas or South America, or or Africa, obviously. So yeah, there's a lot of different kind of like not knowing, like not even beginning to understand like what anything really is. And but yeah, so yeah, there's like one city like he describes where it's called Armarilla, and not all of them. The thing I like about this is that not every single one of these cities are necessarily like otherworldly and like not necessarily positive things. They're almost like there's some of them that are almost kind of foreboding, like a little bit scary, and like some of them have weird kind of independent dream logic to them, like this one of Armarilla. Whether Armarilla is like this because it is unfinished or because it is demolished, whether the cause is some enchantment or only a whim, I do not know. The fact remains that it has no walls, no ceilings, no floors. It has nothing that makes it seem a city, except the water pipes that rise vertically, whether houses should be and spread horizontally, where there should be floors should be. A forest of pipes that ends on the taps, showers, and sprouts overflows. Against the sky, the lavobo's white stands out in bathtub with other porcelain, like a late fruit that hanging from the boughs. Yeah, so it's like everything here seems to be left half done, half finished. So that's another very human sentiment. But yeah, so another thing I noticed is like parallels people drew to Borges, Louis Borges, and his kind of thought experiment, kind of not his magic realism take on like cities that are like one of them was like a certain city that's a scale model and the scale model is like a something like a 1 to 2 or like a 3 to 4 ratio of the city, and that everything that you do is like almost like a this is kind of a my layman's kind of way of describing it, but it's like almost like a voodoo kind of consequence of like you changing anything that you draw up on this mock-up schematic of the city, and like anything you do on that will instantly change in real life. So I think that's kind of how it went. But yeah, it's like things like that, or the Garden of Forking Paths, or the Circular Ruins too, which is like like a man dreams up another man and summons him into existence just on account of his own thoughts. So it's like this very kind of Platonic almost kind of form, or playing around with like this idea of like a perfect form and like visualizing that until it like manifests itself. But yeah, I love how he's able to. Calvino kind of describes these cities that have their own kind of detached ways, like kind of their own. One of them is one that's like very profoundly wasteful, and they throw away all their waste. I can't remember the name of the city. But yeah, and they seem to be kind of distended in time. Like there's no one kind of. It's not just. This is why it's like very loose biographical. Even though the same kind of fears and like the same kind of attitude that Marco Polo had, and at least what we can glean from history is kind of expressed in this. It's through a very dreamlike, surreal lens of without time has no like causality on it. Like time is like kind of suspended in this narrative. So I thought that was very interesting. But yeah, there was another part of Horhus that I'm actually reading right now that Jean Baudrillard says in not Charles Baudrillard, Jean Baudrillard in Simulacrum, I believe. He talks about like in the concept of the simulacrum of something, like a smaller scale kind of version of something else, like a simulation in there's a hyper reality and there's reality as we know it, and then there's a hyper reality. He talks about Horhus a little bit, at least in the part I've only read, like less than halfway through it. Trying to take my time with it. It's because it's very dense. Well, it's not like that thick, but it's like very dense thematically. And yeah, he talks about kind of that in TV and how TV it's its own kind of simulation of hyperreality, and it's like the first reality TV show is like just like right around when he was writing that, I guess. So it was like pretty contemporary for the time, abreast with what was going on. So, but yeah, he mentioned like Horhus, and his like kind of look into the idea of like simulation and stuff like that. But yeah, that is all I have for Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino. Just definitely recommend it, and thanks for watching.